Society, Lord Wilson, is very sad that he's not able to be here for this lecture, and he's asked me to chair it in his place. My name is David Edward, and I'm the convener of the International Committee of the Society. It's my duty to introduce our speaker. This is part of the celebrations that mark the Polish presidency of the Council of the European Union for 6 months from July. We're currently in the course of the Polish presidency, and our sympathy goes out to Poland in having to chair the European Union at this particular time. But it's a great thing that there is a Polish presidency, and it perhaps reminds us why the European Union is there. Our speaker, and we welcome Dr. Tomasz Trafas, the Consul General of Poland, who's with us this evening. And thank you, Consul General, for organizing everything. Our speaker is Professor Jacek Purchla, who comes from Krakow and is going to speak about Krakow, nation, town, memory, the Krakow experience. But let me first say a little about the RSE. The RSE is Scotland's National Academy. That means it is the equivalent for Scotland of the Royal Society in London and the British Academy. Our academy differs from many others in that we cover all disciplines, including public life, business and commerce. And the aim of the Royal Society of Edinburgh is to bring, as far as possible, the skills of the fellowship to the public life of Scotland, and to be the circle in which events like this can take place. So welcome everybody to that. Dr. Purchla is a person who has had a very distinguished academic career. He is an art historian and an economist. He graduated, like the Consul General, from the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, and he's been a professor of humanities since 1994. His chair is the Chair of Economic and Social History. His particular interests are urban development, social history, and art history of the 19th and 20th century, and the protection of the cultural heritage. He's written many books and articles in many languages. He was Vice President of the City of Krakow, and he is the Organizing Director of the International Cultural Center there. He's a member of the Polish Academy of Arts and Letters, and, amongst many other things, a member of the Europa Nostra Council. So his theme today is the city, and he will be speaking about the importance of Krakow to the Polish nation, but concentrating particularly on its place in Polish life today. Thank you. Dr. Purchla.
Chairman, Consul General, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and pleasure of being here tonight. Many thanks for your very kind invitation. I'm happy and I'm privileged for numerous reasons. One has been just mentioned. Polish presidency is, of course, a chance to introduce you better and deeper also to the present phase of Poland. But I would like to emphasize at the beginning that I'm happy because here in Edinburgh I have so many friends. Some of them, they are present today with us, and there is no doubt that coming from Krakow to Edinburgh one could easily try to feel himself like at home. It is not diplomacy. Consul General is seated in the first row. There are numerous reasons for that. Looking at the silhouette of Krakow, one can also prove that Edinburgh and Krakow belong to those European cities and places where the past is always and still essential to understand the present and the future of the place. I'm coming from so-called Central Europe. For many of you it is Eastern Europe or Central and Eastern Europe. Just to help to recognize Krakow better, I'm not going to say that I'm coming from the heart of Europe, but I'm going to say that Krakow is at the moment the only metropolis, Central European metropolis of such a dimension, located almost exactly at the same distance in between Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Bratislava, Budapest, which is not fulfilling an important political function at the moment, and we are happy with that. It is the first message I'm taking the liberty to pass to Edinburgh, and your reaction proves that we have many things in common. We are so-called Europa Minor or Younger Europe, which means that the valley of Vistula River, we say Wisła in Polish, is this natural gate for Christianity, for European civilization understood as Christianity since, let's say, the mid of the 10th century onwards. It is the experience of Hungary, the experience of Czech or Bohemian kingdom, and the experience of Polish kingdom. Those three medieval kingdoms, just a reminder, started the recorded history to be converted and to start this recorded history in the mid of the 10th century. The oldest Polish monastery on the rock, just at the vicinity of Krakow, on the river, looks still like the royal hill in Krakow, Wawel, which will be quite important part of my story tonight. The place which could be easily defined as the origin of Krakow, a Juraic rock on the river, well defended since early medieval times, the seat of the duke, later on the kings and the bishop. The cathedral of Krakow, the royal cathedral, is not just ecclesiastical place and symbol, is, as we used to say, ara patria, is a kind of the altar of the nation for numerous reasons. Since early medieval time, the place where our symbols of our sovereignty, like St. Maurice's spire or the Heilige Lance given by Otto III to the first Polish king, are kept. The shrine of St. Stanislas, the bishop and the martyr, the patron of Krakow and Poland, the coronation sword, as this cathedral used to be the coronation and the burial place of the Polish, of the kings of Poland. But I'm going to talk about this special position and special place of Krakow in our national mythology, and to understand this very process and this very phenomena, which touches mainly the 19th, the 20th century, the modern time, one should remember that the top age for Krakow, historically speaking, is the turn of the 15th and the 16th century. It is not only the seat of the kings of Poland, the Royal Hill, but one of the most dynamic centers of European economy, chartered on the German law in the mid of the 13th century as the result of the Mongols' invasion. It is why we are very proud of this great symmetry of this very consequent urban plan of the mid of the 13th century, which is not the case of Cologne, Paris, London, Milan, the biggest cities of medieval Europe, which is the case of this new Europe, where this civilization were not only implemented but has been developed. It is the first creative moment in Krakow's presence in European history, and it is why Krakow was listed as the UNESCO World Heritage already 1978 as this very special model of a European medieval city. Krakow was the member of Hanseatic League, which could be a surprise because Hansa used to be the Baltic and the North Sea mainly, but it emphasizes or stresses the economic power and economic meaning of Krakow concerning especially late medieval trade. So it was a busy cosmopolitan place with this big market square where the International Cultural Center, I'm here also in this very capacity as the director of the center, is located. So Krakow was chartered, and this late medieval time, the golden era for Krakow, should be mentioned just as a kind of introduction concerning the story of Krakow. It is the proof, the main altar by 5 stars, the masterpiece of late medieval European art, and Krakow depicted first time at the very end of the 15th century as its panorama of the city is concerned. Krakow, which used to be already a kind of agglomeration of the Royal Hill and numerous cities and suburbs surrounding, like in Prague and many other European cities of that time. So this very first creative moment in Krakow's history is very much connected with Hanseatic Europe as a political concept and is mainly represented by this medieval core of the city. But almost the same time, at the turn of the 15th and the 16th century, this golden era for Krakow is very much connected with the Jagiellons as the dynasty present at the Polish throne since the end of the 14th century, and we are very proud, together with Consul General of Poland present here and his respective wife, that we are graduated from the Jagiellonian University, which is the oldest Polish university, founded by the king, 1364, which means that it is the second after Prague oldest university of Central Europe and the oldest Slavonic university. Collegium Maius proves this medieval tradition, which I understand is well received in Scotland, being proud of St Andrews, not mentioning many other important Scottish universities, including Edinburgh. Copernicus, we are always proud of him, but it is not the lecture about Copernicus, it is the lecture about memory. To understand the place and its memory, one should remind also the second important creative chapter in Krakow's history, which is this Jagiellonian Krakow and the Royal Hill converted by the Jagiellons into the function of the nest of of the political concept, which meant the Jagiellonian Europe, not just Lithuania, Poland, Ukrainian territories, but the Jagiellons ruling from Wawel also Czech and Hungarian territories, the Jagiellonian eagle and the tombs of the Jagiellons in the cathedral, starting with the founder of the dynasty, the last pagan ruler of Europe, who married the king of Poland. It was she, Jadwiga of Anjou dynasty, and started to develop this very concept which was continued by his sons and grandsons. What is very special concerning this Jagiellonian concept of Central Europe, which is not well known in the West, it is of course the concept of the bridge, symbolized by this burial chapel of the Jagiellons, of Kazimir the Jagiellon, the son of the founder of the dynasty. Holy Cross Chapel, purely late Gothic ceiling, but covered by the artists invited by the Jagiellons from Pskov. So this dialogue between Latin and Byzantine Europe was one of those essential elements of the Commonwealth, which is here reminded, the Commonwealth which spread between the Baltic and the Black Sea, and the power of the dynasty and the meaning of the Commonwealth is symbolized by the dimension and by the artistic quality of the residence of the Jagiellons at Wawel, which is by no means, I hate the expressions, the only one, the most beautiful, the biggest and the greatest, but it is the greatest Renaissance residence of Europe, created due to the royal patronage by the Italians, invited directly from Tuscany, almost the same time when Feitsters was completing his main altar in Our Lady Church at the main square. So two different worlds met at the same time during this top age of Krakow, during the golden time of the Jagiellonian dynasty, which was competing successfully with the Habsburgs. So the burial chapel of the last kings of this dynasty is considered as this pearl of the Italian Renaissance to the north of Alps. I do come from this very strange part of Europe where political borders used to be changed much faster than cultural. I wonder to what extent it is something which could be well understood on the island, but it is just a reminder of the Commonwealth, but also of the position of Krakow, which was located just at the very corner, southwestern corner of this huge Commonwealth, ruled with the very unusual system of so-called democracy of nobility. This very panorama of Krakow around 1600 is a kind of a picture, photography of the urban development of the agglomeration of Krakow in its peak and top, when Krakow around 1600 was, let's say, equal concerning its human potential, namely demography, political meaning, economic power, culture, creativity, to Vienna and Prague, two other important metropolitan cities and places of Central Europe. It was also the time when the Scottish minority was the second biggest foreign, if I may say foreign, colony. I do not feel myself in Edinburgh as a foreigner. The second biggest minority of Krakow those days. They were They were mainly business people, I mean traders. But what is important as a kind of a beginning of my story concerning the 19th and the 20th century fate of Krakow, its specificity, that it is the top, the peak, and the end of prosperity. So Krakow is quite rapidly losing its political meaning. It's quite easy to start to understand why. Since the beginning of the 17th century, Warsaw, much better located, especially from the perspective of Lithuanian and Ruthenian nobility, serves as the place, a meeting place of our parliament, and finally as also the seat of the king. Krakow, up to the end of the 18th century, formally fulfills the function of the capital as the coronation place, the burial place, but is losing its political meaning. There is no any longer royal patronage in the city. It is losing its economic power, the collapse of continental trade. You know better than me why. Great geographical discoveries, colonies, Atlantic trade, and so on. It is why, comparing this panorama around 1600 with panorama around 1800, one can understand better this British proverb, poverty is the best conservator. So we have Krakow put into the huge refrigerator for more than 200 centuries. It is why we are now proud that Krakow is so well protected as a late medieval and early Renaissance European metropole. At the very end of the 18th century, this city, visited by Goethe and Balzac and described by foreigners as a ghost city, the city which was, concerning its population, depopulated, becomes the center of Polish efforts to defend the reminders of our sovereignty. 1794, a year before the third partition of Poland and a year before this very moment when Poland is simply deleted from the map of Europe, Tadeusz Kościuszko, I know that this very pronunciation could be quite difficult for you, but I wonder if I say Koziaki, which is Australian pronunciation. The highest peak of Australia is Mount Koziaki, Kościuszko, after him. Our freedom fighter, who was engaged together with Lafayette and Washington for American struggle for independence, he initiated in Krakow this very uprising to defend sovereignty. Why in Krakow? Because Krakow, and it is the proof, was considered as the symbol of Polish sovereignty. And the next proof for that is the Congress of Vienna, 1815, after the end of the time of Napoleon, when Europe is reshuffled, divided again. Krakow, to the greatest surprise, this bankrupt and ghost city, becomes the subject of controversy between Prussia, Russia, and Austria, three partitioning powers. Why? Because Krakow was considered as the capital of non-existing Poland. And as a kind of a compromise between the Tsar Alexander I and Prussia and Austria, Krakow is declared in Vienna to be the free state of Krakow, the Republic of Krakow, with the French Constitution, the city and, let's say, its vicinity, a kind of a belt long of about 50 kilometers, up to the Prussian border. And it is something very unusual, but it is the proof, once again, of this symbolic or symbolical meaning of Krakow, not just for the nation, but also for Europe, for partitioning powers for Europe, for foreigners. Krakow was declared in this very treaty as strictly neutral, so we are not allowed to have our own army, but it was so-called militia, uniform according to the Napoleonic tradition. And what is also important, that Krakow becomes those days the center of European contrabanda, if I may say so. Because it was a kind of a vacuum between Prussia, Austria and Russia in the era of protectionism. So half of the industrial production of Prussia went to small Krakow. Why? Not to be smuggled to Austria and to Russia. And it is the beginning of prosperity. Again. It is why we are flexible. But my point is more important, because the message I'm bringing from Krakow is that not money, but the spirit is essential. So Kościuszko, who failed with his uprising and who died on exile in Switzerland, in Solaire or Solothurn in Switzerland, he is brought back home and buried at Wawel among the kings. It is the beginning of our new romantic tradition, which was possible because of this neutrality. Krakow those days, in the 20s, in the 30s, is, so to speak, sovereign republic. According to Clemens von Metternich, who was very angry with that, Krakow was simply the nest of Polonismus and revolutionary movements. And Kościuszko is commemorated in a double way. On the one hand side, he is buried in the special crypt among the kings, but he is commemorated in the form of this artificial mound, which refers to old Slavonic tradition as a symbolical graveyard of the hero. So one can say that already in the first half of the 19th century, Krakow is treated among the Poles as a kind of a Polish Mecca, as the symbol of our efforts. But in the middle of the 40s, the Republic is liquidated. Metternich decides to break the Treaty of Vienna. United Kingdom protested, but nevertheless, 1846, Krakow is incorporated to the Habsburg Empire and maintains up to the First World War in Galicia, which was the biggest Kronland, the province of the Austrian part of the Habsburg Empire, as a very peripherally located place. One can see here not just the medieval core, the royal hill and the city with the main square, which is easy to recognize, but this green belt of almost 3 kilometers long, replacing the medieval walls. It was the creation of the Republic, the creation of the open city, the symbol of modernization. I'm not saying capitalism yet, but anyway, the end of feudalism. But when Austrians came, they decided to convert Krakow into the function of the most important Austrian fortress, Festung Krakow, located just 8 kilometers to the south of the new Russian-Austrian border. So from the perspective of Vienna, Krakow up to the First World War maintains as the garrison city, peripherally located, important just for military reasons, especially that the tension between Russia and Austria, starting with the Crimean War, will be stronger and stronger. So even Kościuszko Mount, the symbol of freedom, is arrested by the citadel constructed by the Austrians. But the same Kościuszko Mount is becoming the target of, let's say, national pilgrimage, which means that the specificity of Krakow at the turn of the 19th and the 20th century is based on this dichotomy, if I may say so. From the Viennese perspective, just a provincial city, the fortress, which meant no space for industrialization. Krakow, up to the Second World War, could be defined as a non-industrial, proto-industrial city, opposite to Silesian cities located in the vicinity. But from the Polish perspective, Krakow is becoming the spiritual capital of non-existing Poland, the symbol, and this very function is strengthened by the new Kaiser, the Emperor Franz Joseph I, Francis Joseph I, here symbolically, uniform in the Polish noble costume, which symbolizes this political deal between the Habsburgs and Polish nobility in Galicia. We are talking about the 60s of the 19th century, when the Poles in the Russian part of the Polish territories are the victims of a real bloody terror after the next uprising, January uprising, and strong Russification means that in Warsaw, up to the First World War, there is no chance to develop national life. I mean, education, universities, cultural life, and so on. The same means, since the 60s onwards, with the Prussian part. Otto von Bismarck and Kulturkampf were addressed not just against Catholicism, but mainly against the Polish factor in the Prussian part of the territories. So Galicia, the Austrian part, is becoming the Polish Piedmont. The only part of the former Polish territories when the Poles are allowed to develop national life, numerous forms. And even more, Galicia, before the First World War, it is 10 million inhabitants, like Portugal right now, quite a big province, multicultural, multi-ethnic, with not just Polish, but also Ukrainian and Jewish factor especially. And Lviv, Lemberg, is the capital of Galicia, but there was no Galician nation. So Lviv was cosmopolitan, following Vienna as the provincial capital. Krakow, without any formal administrative function, becomes the capital of non-existing Poland, numerous forms. It is why the Austrian Emperor, in September 1880, is so enthusiastically received in Krakow, which would be impossible in Warsaw, receiving Tsar Alexander II at the same time, or in Poznan, receiving their Kaiser, the Emperor Wilhelm I. It proves this very special atmosphere of the city, which continues this romantic tradition to convert Wawel into the function of Polish Acropoli, a holy hill. Mickiewicz, the Polish Goethe, I'm looking for the Scottish equivalent, who died as many on exile, finally put at Wawel. And heritage, so well protected, now interpreted mainly in national way, including different stories, including the real mythology But what is also important that Krakow at the turn of the 19th and the 20th century, being quite suffocated because of the function of the fortress, which is visible at this very map. It was the most densely populated and developed city of the monarchy those days, is converted to be modern. And the main driving force of this modernization is not industrialization, but is this national function. And there is no Polish government, but there is, since the 60s, the local government, which is aware of its obligation to act as a substitute of the national government. So the whole national program, which is created in Krakow, like in Budapest, like in Zagreb, like in many Central European national capitals, is run in this very case by the local government. The cloth hall, the symbol of Krakow's prosperity in the 15th and in the 16th century, is ruined. And it was the first task concerning the new strategy undertaken by the local government. Restoration, but also implementation of the new function. Any longer the function of Palais du Commerce, Musentemple, the Temple of Muses, the first national museum, is implemented by the municipality. The university, the Jagiellonian University, which is becoming once again the most blooming and flourishing Polish university at the turn of the 19th and 20th century. The theater, which is not just municipal theater, the inscription at front, Krakow to the national arts, proves this very obligation of the municipality. And of course it was not just the budget of municipality, but numerous donations, foundations sent from all the Polish territories, from exile in Paris, from Ukraine, from Lithuania, from the Prussian part, did create this very program, comparable once again to Prague, to Budapest, to Zagreb, to Ljubljana, concerning all those national institutions like the Academy of Arts and Letters mentioned by the chairman of this very meeting. Looking at the statistics of the major cities of the Habsburg Empire around 1900, one can once again realize that Krakow is relatively small. It's not any longer comparable to Vienna. Opposite. Vienna before the First World War was the sixth biggest city of the world. London was the biggest, of course. But Vienna was almost 2 million inhabitants big, just at the eve of the First World War. Krakow was 20 times smaller, but concerning its spiritual potential, you used to say tangible and intangible. Intangible meaning, the symbolical meaning, was simply the focal point of Polish efforts. It touches also the problem of Art Nouveau, so-called Young Poland movement, which comes after the era of historicism. It was not just the influence of Vienna and the famous Wiener Secession, but it was also a matter of the second chapter of our Romanticism with Wyspiański, who should be mentioned as a famous prophet, but also designer, painter. And his vision to convert Wawel into the function of Acropolis, fortunately never completed, proves the spirit of the time. Looking for the freedom, looking for sovereignty, being convinced that we shall regain it, Wawel should be this essential part, the seat of the future parliament and so on. At the same time, just before the First World War, Krakow finally is allowed to demolish the Austrian fortifications And this master plan of 1910 shows the impact of Ebenezer Howard and the concept of the British urban planning. I think not just the idea of garden city, but I'm not saying that Edinburgh is visible, but the city in green is this concept, and the focal point of this concept is this very meadow, Krakow Common, which I used to name the Meadow of Freedom. And why, I will try to explain you, trying to reach the conclusion in 15 minutes time, according to the timetable. First time, this meadow is instrumental and essential when Józef Piłsudski, future father and founder of our independence of 1918, organizes in August 1914 at this very meadow the first Polish military organization, uniform, since the mid of the 19th century, and starts together with the Austrians the war against Russia for freedom. And this, as you maybe know, to be successful in Polish politics, you should suffer, you should be the martyr, you should be oppressed. So he's a perfect example, because when he, in the middle of the war, realized that Austria has a small chance to be the winner, he was arrested and kept by Germans in Magdeburg. Earlier, as he was a Polish noble born nearby Vilnius in Lithuania, he was oppressed by the Russians. He was sent to Siberia and so on. So he suffered of all three oppressors of Poland. It is why November 1918 he is warmly welcomed at the railway station in Warsaw as the symbol of our freedom. And as the head of the Polish state, after the successful war against Soviet Russia, 1920, he visits Krakow and, of course, visits Wawel to say hello to the kings, to Kościuszko, to Mickiewicz, to all the heroes. Krakow, during the interwar time, continues its mission, which means that we have Poland reborn, we have Warsaw as a very dynamic, modern, big city, the capital of New Poland, and we have Krakow, the ancient capital, continuing the tradition of national funerals, different ceremonies of national character. In Warsaw, it was said those days that if there is any industry in Krakow well developed, it is funeral industry. And we are very well in this very business, very professional in this very, up to now. I can prove you in that very soon. It is the famous jubilee of 250 years of the Battle of Vienna, when the King of Poland, Sobieski, helped Vienna to stop the Turkish invasion. It is not well remembered in Vienna, but it is very well remembered in Krakow. It is the next spécialité de la maison. And it is once again this big medal of freedom. And the last appearance of Piłsudski in Krakow live. 2 years later, May 1935, when he dies, he is buried among the kings at Wawel, and as in the case of Kościuszko 100 years earlier, the nation decides to commemorate the hero, the father of the independence, to construct the next artificial mount. It was a big operation involving also the Jewish community of Krakow. Krakow those days was the city of about 250,000 inhabitants, 65,000 of the citizens were Jewish, and here is the top of the Jewish religious community on its way to construct the monument to the hero of Polish independence. Completed 1938, more or less. So Krakow, after the Second World War, is the place of different traditions, even this medieval signal which is produced every hour to the four sides of the universe, day and night, since the middle of the 20s is the official signal of Polish radio, broadcasted also now around the world. So you can imagine how to this quite comfortable place, which was Krakow as the university center, the center of international tourism, the spiritual capital of Poland, a very cultural place, quite wealthy, with clergy and landed aristocracy, numerous art collections, how September 1939 was not only shocking because it is not the appropriate expression, sorry, my English is pretty poor, but it was simply the beginning of a very different chapter of city's history. Krakow was declared to be open during this September operation, was taken by Wehrmacht already September the 5th, the 6th, at the beginning of the war, was not quite distant from the German border, just 60-70 kilometers, was not defended because of the heritage, because of the meaning. Warsaw was defended up to the end of September, was the city of 1.5 million those days, was bombarded, was damaged. It was one of the reasons why Hitler decided to make this very choice. Krakow is chosen and declared already October 1939 to be the capital of das Generalgouvernement, the remainder of pre-war Poland, territories which were not taken directly by Hitler and incorporated to the Reich, or not taken by Stalin, who decided also to contribute in this next partition of Poland. So it was the territory inhabited by 15-16 million people, quite the human potential, ruled from Wawel, officially chosen by Hans Frank, a very close cooperator of Hitler, to be his official and private residence, with this intention to convert Krakow in a very short period of time into, according to Hitler's idea, uralte deutsche Stadt Krakow, the ancient and always German city of Krakow. So after being for 150 years prepared to serve as the spiritual capital of Poland, during one day Germans, Nazis, political correctness, are deciding to change, let's say, the story, the history and the reality of the city. The main square is now renamed Adolf Hitler Platz. All the monuments created since the first half of the 19th century concerning this Polish national program are damaged. The first is, of course, Grunwald, Tanneberg, Denkmal, but also Mickiewicz, Polish Goethe, as the example. The professors of our university are already at the beginning of November sent to Sachsenhausen, but I'm not going to bother you with the problem of terror and human losses. There are things which are quite well known. What is not very well known, that quite rapidly Germans prepared the vision and the plan, here is the model, to create in Krakow this bombastic, huge, new administrative center for das Generalgouvernement following Nuremberg. Quite outstanding German urban planner, former main architect of Cologne and Leipzig, went from Berlin with this task, and he was quite perfect replacing the idea of Nuremberg at front of Wawel. The city itself was divided. The center and the best districts, the west end of Krakow, the most modern part, was declared as nur für Deutsche, only German district, and the whole Jewish population was replaced into this very small ghetto, specially created at the opposite side of the river. Roman Polanski, the famous film director, as a young boy was one of those ghetto survivors. It is why he did manage to produce Pianist, this film about Warsaw Ghetto. The story of Krakow is well known due to Spielberg and Schindler's List. Removal of the whole Jewish population at the opposite side, and the end, March 1943. And Auschwitz, which was so nearby, as the symbol. But in spite of those human losses, in spite of collections which were simply looted and plundered by Germans, which is the case still open, Krakow is the only big Polish historic city which symbolizes continuity. There is no comparison between Krakow and the fate of Warsaw, for example, the case of Gdańsk, of Wrocław, and so on. And it is the beginning of the finale grande of my speech, because it was the next paradox that for the new regime, it became the problem. Krakow, the congestion of university professors, intelligentsia, clergy, nobility, and petit bourgeois, according to Karl Marx and Lenin, was a reactionary city. What to do? It is Warsaw. Just to implement proletariat. Polish Magnitogorsk, Polish Komsomolsk, 1949, the beginning of the Stalinist time, Nowa Huta is implemented, a kind of a utopia, città ideale, one can say. The Stalinist model implemented just 6-7 kilometers eastern from the medieval core of Krakow, as the separate city for the working class, designed for about 100,000 inhabitants, in this typical Stalinist form, becoming for the Krakowians the symbol of Sovietization, Stalinism, but very soon the symbol of a disaster. Because this very type of industrialization, well known in Britain in the first half of the 19th century, which went to Krakow pretty late due to Roosevelt from Gary, Indiana, technology from Gary, Indiana from the 20s, according to Lend-Lease, sent by the Americans to the Soviets and sold by Stalin as a gift of the Soviet nation to Krakow. It changes the function, the spirit, the model of urbanization. Krakow is growing. Krakow, like a vacuum cleaner, is attracting poor people from the highland, mainly farmers, peasants, who are becoming now the leading social class of the new system. But what happened finally? That this symbol of progress has created the greatest disaster. If you take Fukuyama's book, The End of History, Chernobyl and Krakow are mentioned as two examples of these ecological disasters created by the totalitarian system. It is the picture taken in the 70s when acid rains, pollutions, were damaging not just the people, the highest rate of cancer and rachitis and so on, but also the heritage. It is why in 1978 Krakow is also listed by UNESCO during the first inscription. Because those days Krakow is quite famous, especially in British and American press, as neglected and polluted and neglected. But at the same time, Krakow, being opposite to Warsaw, being opposite to Prague, to Budapest, to Bratislava, not the center of communist political life, becomes a very creative place, a congestion of intellectuals and artists. Tadeusz Kantor, so well known in Edinburgh, Richard DeMarco, he used to invite this very theater and many other artists from Krakow those days quite regularly. So Krakow was quite unusual due to its continuity, heritage, but also creative potential of the university. Meant in the 60s, the names like Penderecki, Wajda, Kantor, and so on and so on. Those names up to now are a kind of a visit card of Polish culture. But as Poland is the country of paradoxes, the greatest paradox appears in Nowa Huta. The first socialistic city, the model of the progress and new Poland, is becoming a kind of a battlefield between the regime and the new inhabitants who are asking and finally demanding the church. There was no space for the church in the first socialistic city of Poland. And this very church, looking even at this very picture, is in a certain contrast to those socialistic dormitories, the same constructed, the same model and function, the same technology even between Ost-Berlin and Vladivostok. It is a kind of a Le Corbusier interpretation constructed due to him, the Cardinal of Krakow, because the Roman Catholic Church of Poland, opposite to Czechoslovakia, to Hungary, to all the other so-called socialistic countries, has never been damaged by communists. Opposite. Becomes in the 60s and especially in the 70s stronger and stronger as a kind of an umbrella for the city, for the society. And Cardinal of Krakow, Karol Wojtyła, was instrumental in this game, play and struggle. He did manage to open this church 1977. A year later, he is elected to be the Pope, and 1979, June, he creates for the communists the greatest disaster, because they were not in the position to say no to the head of the Holy See to visit his land. It was once again the Meadow of Freedom, where we met. 1.5 million and realize that solidarity is something. It is the beginning of this final chapter of Polish contemporary history and the final chapter of the mission of Krakow as the spiritual capital. A year later, an electrician from Gdańsk is enthusiastically welcomed at front of the International Cultural Center at the main square of Krakow. Consul General and myself, we can recognize many faces of our colleagues and friends. The first governor of Krakow, our big boss and partner during our revolution 10 years later, 1989-90. He has passed away as many of present at the picture. So the beginning of the Festival of Solidarity, autumn 1980, with the famous White March of the students of Krakow, to a certain extent illegal, for sure spontaneous, in communist Poland, May 1981, after the trial of this assassination, attempt by Aliakcha of the Pope. The Pope is struggling for life in Gemelli, in the hospital in Rome, and the students of Krakow spontaneously, 100,000 students, are organizing this manifestation of solidarity. So this human potential has been, how shall I put it in English, awakened. But half a year later, Jaruzelski declares the war against solidarity, namely against the people. The same square. Students' demonstrations damaged regularly by the very oppressive forces of, special forces of militia. But the paradox is that the real fortress of Solidarność is not the university and poor university professors, but the workers. And at front of the workers, Marxists and Leninists were innocent, because the workers should be on the opposite side, according to the theory. And the church was, of course, the umbrella. So it was the real fortress. The Lenin shipyard in Gdańsk and the church of Nowa Huta were the centers of resistance, underground movement at the beginning of the 80s, in the middle of the 80s. And Poor Lenin was defended by militia against us, if I may say so, the citizens, because it was still the symbol, was the symbol of oppression, of Sovietization. It is just a short story, so coming to the conclusion, this new opening, 1989, the collapse of communism, round table, the only Polish uprising which was not bloody and was successful. We are very proud of this Consul being involved in this very business. And this picture, Wawel, the Holy Hill, and the first new investment in this new era, founded by Andrzej Wajda, our famous film director, who has got Kyoto Prize. Those days for us it was like Nobel Prize, especially that Polish currency was still not convertible. So to get $1.5 million American dollars, it was something. And Andrzej Wajda was simply so dedicated to Krakow that decided to create here, on the river, the Center for Japanese Art and Technology. Why Japanese Art and Technology? Because it is not well known, it was not well known those days, that Krakow has got the greatest collection of ancient Japanese art in Central Europe, which was hidden. But why I'm saying about that? Because it proves that Krakow becomes, after 1989, once again, to its double function. On the one hand side, the spiritual capital, but on the other, very cosmopolitan place, very much open, as it used to be, always. Open not just towards Europe, but open globally. Royal Mile of Krakow, Florianska Street. I'm always proud of this picture. 1989, polluted, neglected, but authentic. Being invited, I was trying to take the picture of the same street. We are playing a different game, and it is the conclusive message. We are already conquested. It is a picture taken through the window of my office at the International Cultural Center, and I have now a big collection of such examples of dismagization, McDonaldization, privatization, commercialization, commodification, uniformization. We are in a common European Union which is Americanized. And this Coca-Cola was put, it was quite a perversion, almost exactly at the place where Kościuszko promised to save the nation. But in the 90s, we did really manage to delete the results of the pollution in a double sense. 20 years ago, Lenin Steel Mill, it was 40,000 workers, angry and hungry workers. Now it is 4,000, and the owner is the citizen of London. His name, as far as I remember, is Mittal. Lashmi Mittal.
Indian citizen. He's not British citizen.
But his headquarters is in London. It is what I'm saying. But we are not guilty, we are in Scotland. So Krakow now is trendy, is a success story, no doubt. 7 million visitors coming. The problem of tourist management and corruption becomes a major problem of the city. Those shabby hotels are approaching the holy hill of the Poles. And this very picture requires just a short and conclusive comment which gives you the final message from Krakow. This picture was taken 4 years ago, just at the eve of the world financial crisis. I was in Dublin at the conference, Heritage and Prosperity. The conference was quite boring as usual. But I was quite inspired being in Dublin, because on my way from the conference center to the airport, the Irish taxi driver asked me, as usual taxi drivers ask, what country do you come from? And I started desperately to explain him that I'm not coming from Holland, but from Poland. And I was shocked, because when I said Poland, he said I was twice in Poland, in Krakow, this year. I asked him why, and his answer was quite significant. First time I came with Ryan, because you are cheap. Cheap beer, cheap girls. But the city is so nice and so fancy that the second time I came simply to buy the apartment flat close to Wawel. So I realized that on my way back I should run and take the picture of those apartment flats bought by Irish taxi drivers. And it is the conclusion, which means that during the recent 20 years' time, we went from the Soviet system and the Red Ocean into the, you know better the name of the system, but parallelly we do continue, of course, the national myth. Władysław Sikorski, the Prime Minister of the Polish government on exile, came from England 1993 at Wawel. And finally, the recent chapter of this national myth is him once again. as the most famous Krakowian of the 20th century and the father of our independence, no doubt. One can believe, or not in Godfather, but one should believe that he was quite essential. And when he visited Krakow last time, 2002, to say goodbye and to open this great Basilica of the Mercy at the place where, as a young boy during the German occupation, he worked in the quarry, in the sodium factory. Now it is a huge pilgrimage center. People are coming from Philippines, from all over the world, 2.5 million visitors a year. He was welcomed and greeted with the goodbye by 2.5 million at the Medal of Freedom. So it is impossible to understand modern Poland, contemporary Poland, and Polish modernization and Polish future without, one can say, the ballast, one can say heritage, one can say memory, one can say the contribution of him and the Church to our final victory. It was his final goodbye from the famous window of his residence, and Krakow was crying when 2005 he was passing away. But what is the final picture, according to the wish of the Consul, is united Europe, of course. And no doubt that Edinburgh and Krakow are today much closer than it used to be 20 or 25 years ago when I was coming here to visit this magic place first time in my life. Many thanks for your attention.
Well, it's not for me at this stage to give a vote of thanks, but I'm sure you'll all agree that that was a fascinating lecture in almost every way. It illustrated in the early part why Norman Davies called his History of Poland God's playground, but it also, I think, illustrated the importance of cities in national life. And in particular, perhaps should awaken us to the need to recalibrate our vision of Europe. He was talking about Middle Europe, and it is Middle Europe, it's not Eastern Europe. So I'm sure there will be many questions and comments. Can I just outline the rules, so to speak? The first is that if you want to intervene, please put up your hand. And please put up your hand, and then if you're called upon, wait until you get the microphone, because if you don't get the microphone, your intervention won't be recorded, and in any event other people may have difficulty hearing what you're saying. When you get the microphone, speak carefully into it in order that it works properly. And speak slowly and say please who you are. So who would like to start? Must be some.
We say in Krakow, to big modesty is vanity. I wonder how it works in Scotland. But
yes, please.
Thank you. Elaine Ballantyne, City of Edinburgh Council. I've worked with the Council for many years in international relations and have had great pleasure of working with the City of Krakow over the years. And my question, Professor Purchla, is in the changes that have happened in the city, we have worked a number of occasions with European funding from cooperation projects to exchange good practice across our cities. Is there any evidence, and there may not be, I understand that, but is there any evidence over the years that some of the practice that has happened in other parts of Europe has been of benefit to the city of Krakow, and also that Krakow has been able to share its experience in urban development with other cities across Europe?
Yeah.
Firstly, many thanks for this very question, which touches also my personal experience. I have a vivid memory of my meeting in Birmingham in 1991 in my capacity of newly elected deputy mayor of New Krakow with Mark Lazarowicz, those days the leader of the Labour in the municipal parliament, those days. And it was the beginning, too big modesty is vanity, of this jumelage between Edinburgh and Krakow, and I'm so happy with that. And the first real project involving urban planners from Edinburgh, 1992-1993, run at the Krakowian site by the older brother of our Consul General, Professor Kazimierz Trafas from the Jagiellonian University, touched the problem of the revitalization of the former Jewish district of Kazimierz. And it was a certain model, so I can just assure you that since then we have learned a lot.
Yes, Lester Borley.
Lester Borley, a great friend of Jacek Purchla, which is why I'm here.
No doubt about it.
You touched once in your presentation on the Jewish contribution to Krakow in the building of the mound. We shall never recover the population, the Jewish population of Krakow that made Kazimierz such a vital part of the city. Yet when one goes now to the city, one sees a pretend Jewishness about Kazimierz. How can one allow that sort of trivialization of a rich past continue?
Lester, you just touched the key problem of Krakow in a double sense. The first is, of course, the Jewish presence. Since the medieval time, this multi-ethnic tradition of Krakow was based on this Polish-Jewish, Jewish-Polish dichotomy. As I mentioned, before the Second World War, 1/4, 25% of the whole population was Jewish. It is point number one. Point number two, one should remember that, especially in the 16th century, Krakow is the biggest center of Jewish life in Europe. For many reasons, also because of the tolerance of the Polish kingdom versus some other European powers, which I'm not going to mention. It is why up to now Krakow is recognized symbolically as the shrine, Rabbi, Moses, Israel, Remo, and so on. At the turn of the 19th and the 20th century, Krakow is one of the most intriguing places of centers of Jewish life. In this respect, that was the bridge between Hasidic, Orthodox, Eastern, if I say so, may say so, Eastern European interpretation of Jewish life and Jewish culture, and Haskalah movement, this Western, let's say, tradition. It is why 2 or 3 years ago the International Cultural Center organized the exhibition The World After the Catastrophe, successfully received also in Israel, which was for us a kind of a morale booster, emphasizing that before the war Krakow was not just Jewish because of the district of Kazimierz, this medieval, traditional district of the Jews, being under the special protection of the kings those days. But before the Second World War, the last mayor of pre-war Krakow was Jewish. he's buried at the British territory because he went with the Polish army on exile. Directors of our university were Jewish, the elite of lawyers, medical doctors, business people, and so on, which is quite often forgotten because it is this stereotype of photogeneous Jews from the East. Why I'm saying that? Because 1989-90, Kazimierz district was the symbol of negligence and the symbol of the approach of the communists towards Holocaust and towards this very problem. It was a big political issue for the new mayor and new city council. I remember first discussions with the Jewish European Congress, with different Jewish organizations from America, from Israel, a very difficult task, how to revitalize Jewish life without Jews. It is a matter of heritage, of disinherited and disinherited heritage. I'm the last who is going to act here as a kind of a Polish propaganda, but I'm proud. On the one hand side, of course, we have commercialization. We have the same process of damaging authenticity as it happens at the main square of medieval Krakow and all around, in Prague, in Budapest, in many other places. But the success story of Krakow is that non-Jewish activists organized already at the very end of the 80s the Jewish Culture Festival, which is now the most important festival of Krakow, attracting not just Jewish audience, but people who are interested in Jewish life and culture from all over the world. The second half of June, the beginning of July. And it is the way to try to revitalize. But of course there is a bottleneck, the basic one, which is the ownership structure of Kazimierz. As Krakow is the only city of Poland where communists did not damage the register, the poll book by British standards. We say Grundbuch by German standards. Kazimierz is a disaster because before the war it was the district of the poor. If you look at the register of any old house, there are 10, 15, 20 owners. Greenspan, Goldberg, Rosenzweig, and so on. From the time of Josef der Zweite, those names were Germanized by the Austrians, but 99% of those people went to the chimneys of crematoria. And it is a big issue of Poland concerning reprivatization. Sorry for my mispronunciation. And Poland is, it's true, the only post-communist country in the region which has a big problem with this issue. But it is not only our sin, it is life. It is impossible simply to regain the life how it was before 1939. So now Kazimierz is sailing towards Disneyization, a very spontaneous process with a very essential participation of American and Israeli capital. We have now many kosher restaurants and hotels ready to receive any client.
Yes, yeah.
Several National Museum. There's one major difference I can think of between Edinburgh and Krakow. Last time I was in Krakow, I was able to observe from my hotel window Polish workers very effectively and rapidly constructing a train line. You must have seen Princes Street since you've been here this time. Can you offer us any kind of comfort?
Silence could be one of the versions of my reply and my response, but as I'm not Consul General, I'm not a diplomat. I'm shocked. I'm shocked because I'm a photographer, and today, having such a blue sky and sunshine, I did suffer a lot. What should I say, Paul? I'm flying back home tomorrow to catch the nearest tramway in Krakow. We have German system. I mean, the company which runs those new fast tramways in Krakow comes from Berlin. Maybe it is the appropriate address, I don't know.
Any more?
Don't
Just one at the very back.
Steve Burgess, I'm a councillor from Edinburgh and a sit on the transport committee. That was actually one of the questions I was going to ask at the time, but there's another big difference between Krakow and Edinburgh, and that is much of the medieval centre is pedestrianised. How much do you feel that is important for the city of Krakow?
I think that it was quite a big achievement to initiate. Thanks a lot for this question. To start this very process pretty early. It was initiated already at the turn of the 70s and the 80s. And at the moment, it's true that this medieval core, which is pretty big, is quite restricted for the cars, but the bottleneck of that is that if you are going to be efficient implementing such a system, you should invest quite a lot of money in the parking lots and underground or outdoor high-rise garages or parking spaces, which is not the case of Krakow, because the budget of the city is not efficient enough to meet this problem. And even today's morning newspaper, which I read carefully at the board of Lufthansa airplane bringing me to Edinburgh, mentioned that there are negotiations with foreign investors and developers which are going to solve the problem. So at the moment in Krakow, on the one hand side, we are happy, and the local population is accustomed. British visitors coming to this very zone to drink and to enjoy life are more than happy, but the owners of the cars are not. And it is a big political issue for the mayor and the municipal council to solve the problem in those coming 2, 3, 4 years' time, because since 1989 we face in Poland a real revolution concerning, how should I put it, car civilization. In the 80s, car was still the symbol of a very special status, this small Fiat. Today, everybody has the big car.
Perhaps one more, if there is one. Yes.
I'm Jan Heinrich, University of Glasgow. I have a question. You concentrated very much on the Krakow being the national heart in the mythology of Poland.
It was the task or the homework.
Yeah, right, okay. So how does Krakow now sort of negotiate this new role in Europe? Is it still part of this Polish national agenda, or are there other things at stake now? And how do you find that role?
It's a wonderful question, and I understand that Krakow at the moment is the most beautiful case of the positive results of European integration. So since 2004, open air brought not only EasyJet and Ryan, but simply changed a kind of a geography of the strategic development of Krakow, in this very sense that being isolated and being suffocated within the national market. Now, as I proved it with this Irish taxi driver, we do play a global game. And I'm serious, of course. What is at the moment a matter of our serious consideration is the model of the state. Historically, up to the recent decades, Poland used to have the same model like Germany. Polycentric or polycentrical, how should I put it? Many centers. There is Berlin as the capital, but there is Munich and Cologne and Hamburg. Not federal structure, because Poland is a unitarian state. But historically, we used to have the network of 5, 6 centers of civilization, as we used to say before the war. Now, 20 years after the beginning of the process of decentralization, we are more centralized than before 1989. I'm serious. Yesterday I ran the same time in Krakow a discussion with the mayor of Wrocław, the most successful big Polish city, Rafał Dudkiewicz, and he proved that there is Warsaw and a vacuum, and especially after the administrative reform of 1998, when we did create 16 regions, this reform paradoxically weakened the position of Wrocław, Gdańsk, Poznań, Krakow concerning our national market. One national airport, one national television, and so on and so on. You know the system. It means that the chance for Krakow concerning metropolitan functions is university center. Krakow has 15% of our research potential of Poland, which is equal to Warsaw, but Warsaw is 3 times or even 4 times bigger, which means that we have 200,000 university students and 20,000 staff, university staff. That's quite the potential. And the second function is heritage, internationally recognized. So any longer just a national pilgrimage, of course, exists, but of any real economic meaning. It is rather Auschwitz, which is the destination. If you take the statistics concerning Polish museums, the top is Auschwitz, 1.5 million per year. Wagon is 1 million. And this very business is possible only if we have good infrastructure, namely the airports, for example. Up to 2004, our national airline, LOT, there is no secret, was the monopolist, killing international collections from Krakow or from Wrocław. Today, due to European Union, I'm not happy with that, but it was quite efficient, changing on my way to Edinburgh, changing twice, in Munich and in Düsseldorf. But it is like with tramway. It is just like with a tramway system. So European market, you are very right, means that Krakow is now competing with Brno in Moravia, with Prague to a certain extent, and several other cities of this very dimension in Central Europe. One Grenzen, I mean, frontiers are disappearing, and it is really a wonderful experience, especially for my generation.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Can I ask the Consul General, Dr. Trafas, to give the vote of thanks?
It's a really great pleasure for me to have you today, Professor Purchla. Drogi Jacku, I should say in Polish, express, my thanks, because we know many years, so. And thank you for bringing Krakow with you and taking us to Krakow, because, there was some, let's say, very short, very brief travel, to this wonderful city with let's say, interesting heritage and just being here in Edinburgh, we all the time, that's my impression, I am trying to find, these traces and some kind of identities between these two cities, and it's true that spirit of Krakow is very we can compare with the Edinburgh spirit. So that's what, with somebody asking me how I'm feeling here, do you like Scotland, what's about Edinburgh? And my answer is I am feeling very well because, Krakow has the same spirit like Edinburgh, and I think, maybe it's not only my impression. So, once again, Krakow now is a cultural center of among the European countries, so that's also important, and you as a director of the cultural center in Krakow, creator, is a father of this center, which is a kind of a beacon, for other cities, and so there's no doubt, that Krakow still is playing very important place, in united Europe. This lecture was possible and thanks to Royal Society of Edinburgh, and I would like to convey my thanks to to Sir Edward. Thank you very much. You chaired this lecture today and support, as well as the Royal Society. So I would like to express my thanks of support also to the Office of European Commission in Scotland. And although the head of the office, Mr. Mitchison, is not today with us, was not able to join us, but Ms. Carolyn Winchester is representing the office. And the lecture is a part of the program of our office in the Presidency of Poland in the Council of European Union, which started 1st of July. So I am so glad, that, among, some different type of events, we have a chance, to have Professor Purchla here with us. This lecture is, of course, is not only, as I told you, one of many events that are happening in Edinburgh, and the architecture of twin cities of Edinburgh and Krakow will be presented and discussed also during an event organized by Polish Cultural Festival Association with the support of Edinburgh World Heritage and Krakow City Council, as well as City of Edinburgh Council and University of Edinburgh, and as well as our consulate. So Tuesday, 25th of October at 6 p.m. in Matthew Gallery at the University of Edinburgh and on Chambers Street. If you are interested, you will learn more about Krakow and Edinburgh, and especially about architecture. So will be also exhibition and public lecture. So once again, thank you very, very much. Thank you for your presence, and thank you, Professor, for hosting us. And Drogi Jacku, dziękuję bardzo.